that best uses the everything but arms program of the European Union to develop. Bangladesh has realized the opportunities, had used the opportunities, and I think this is a success story for both Bangladesh and the European Union. We see how a country that had very bad conditions in the moment of independence, by its own force and by beneficial trade regulations, could create a kind of an economic miracle and now grow out of this economic monoculture of textile production into a diversified economy with the infrastructure that is developing with now new branches of economy with innovation. So that we see that meanwhile, if we focus on development index, if we focus on GDP per capita, Bangladesh is the front runner on the Indian subcontinent. So first of all, this is a success story, and I'm very proud that I can contribute to this success story. Since Bangladesh is not anymore a very poor country, but it's a country that is going its way, the Everything But Arms program will end soon, and we have to prepare that it goes over into the scheme of preferences, the great scheme of preferences, GSP+, which will allow to continue our good trade relations and which will Bangladesh allow to continue its basic economic model. Bangladesh is fulfilling almost all of the requirements, even of the new GSP+ scheme. So you know there is some more requirements than EBA. A country under GSP+ has to join more conventions, especially of International Labour Organization, etc., etc. This happens, and I have no doubt that Bangladesh will fulfill all the economic and legal requirements. But now there is something that comes, which is very popular in the European Union, that is to mix trade relations with human rights. Now, I'm also a member of the Human Rights Committee here, which is a nice coincidence. And what I see is that although the European Union was founded as an economic union, an economic community, it more and more changes its nature into a political union, and from a political union to an NGO. So it acts sometimes like an NGO, and it is not taking care on trade, on mutual benefits. It's not taking care on growth rates, but it is taking care on some political ideas and ideologies, which mostly are connected with what our colleagues here understand by human rights. So we have to talk about human rights when we talk about trade. And let's give me some remarks on that. First, I believe that the human rights situation in Bangladesh has emerged over the last decades by far. Bangladesh today is a quite well-functioning democracy. It has an independent judiciary. There are fair elections. People can vote. Governments change peacefully. The military is back in the barracks. Military that has a traditional, very important political role. Judiciary is controlling the state and the executive power. Nonetheless, there are more and more attacks on Bangladesh on human rights issues. Why is that the case? Human rights are more and more used as a tool of Western politics to influence in foreign countries. And as long as you have a government that is not fully aligned with Western foreign policy, you have to be aware that you get lectured on human rights as a mean to bring you online with the foreign policy expectations the European Union and the US has. This is quite common. I remember I had a nice talk with an Asian ambassador who is seen as very pro-Western, and at the end of our very nice small talk, I asked him, Excellency, are you get lectured by my colleagues like all your other ambassadors here? And then he very politely smiled and said, Dr. Krah, do you know one non-Western ambassador who is not getting lectured by your colleagues on human rights? So we lecture everybody. So as we lecture everybody, I first have to declare you that I'm not in the business of lecturing you on how to run your country. It's not my business. But you have to be aware that the majority of my colleagues wants to run your country and at least they know exactly what you can do better than the government is doing. I don't know for what reasons. So we have to talk about the concept of human rights and its interference into trade. The first thing is, human rights is by definition a concept that was developed in the West. It's a Western concept that is based on the idea that human rights are something very individual. Now, non-Western traditional societies are not primarily in societies of individuals, they are societies of families. The human rights concept has no idea on such collectives. They only know the individual and the mankind. But all traditional nature-given communities, collectives, beginning with the family, with the tribe, with ethnicities, have no role in the very concept of human rights, because the human rights concept, as a liberal concept which was developed domestically in Western states, only know the state and the individual, and now we have extragated the concept to say we have the individual and we have mankind. We don't even have peoples anymore in that concept. So you have to be aware of this, and my first question and also my first pledge to the present academics is to question your Western colleagues and to question your liberal colleagues on how they can claim that there is a global concept of human rights when this global concept does not reflect the fact that the non-Western world is not only focused on the individual, but also has an understanding of families, of ethnic groups, etc., and how you can add this system, can add these collectives to the system of human rights. The next point, which is quite interesting in human rights, is that it has no understanding of basic human needs. We take an example, the worst boogeyman of the worldwide liberal human rights NGO scene is, as you know, China. China has brought 700 million people out of poverty and hunger over one generation. Under the current Western understanding of human rights, this has absolutely no human rights impact. So bringing people out of hunger and feeding them, giving them a flat, access to clean water and heating in winter has no impact on your human rights level. But if you deny a Soros-funded NGO the access to Hong Kong, this has an impact on human rights. So you obviously see that the concept that was developed for bourgeois people in England and France in the 18th and 19th century is not automatically fitting to a developing country in the global south. When the needs of people are not that they have access to Western NGOs, but the need of the people is to have access to clean water, to a job that can feed them, and at least to have such a economic base that they can live their life according to their own wishes and dreams. So the next question is, why Western NGOs, why Western human rights policy is not able to implement those fundamental questions and fundamental need in the concept of human rights, as they don't do. And the third is that there are blatant double standards. The double standards are that we use the concept of human rights only when we want to criticize those who are not aligned with our foreign policy, as I already mentioned. What you can see that we have a lot of human rights NGOs based in Hong Kong, but we have none in Riyadh. This is not a call to send Human Rights Watch to Riyadh, don't worry, but it is maybe a call to see that you can instrumentalize everything. And you have to be aware that human rights is nothing that comes directly from God or heaven and was given to the prophet, but this is a very human concept, and you have to ask who has the power on it. This is important because human rights are, in almost all countries in the world, undisputed. We all agree that everyone has a pursuit of happiness. We all agree that everyone has a right to live. We all agree that everyone has a right to not to get imprisoned without that his case is heard in a public hearing, etc., etc. And I don't know one government that would deny it, maybe with the exception of North Korea, but probably even they would not deny it, they just would not do it. So when we talk about the absolute basic principles of human rights, we all agree. But now let's go to the questions. A very well-known question is abortion. Is there a human right on abortion, or is there a human right to live for the unborn baby? This question cannot even answer it within the West. So if I would give that question to the European Parliament, I would have both positions. So I would say there is a right to live, and others would say no, there is a right of abortion. In the United States, the question whether there is a right on abortion has split the whole society, until the Supreme Court now gave it back to the states, and every state has a different decision. That means we have a concept of human rights where the beef is in the cases of conflict. And the question you have to answer is, who decides in such cases of conflict? Who decides what is more important? The inner security of your country, or the right even to have hate speech? Something the majority in the European Parliament always would answer in favor of inner security. So we have a hate speech legacy, or a hate speech laws that, in my mind, undermine the freedom of speech. But you have it right actually in Bangladesh. If there is as a manager of an NGO and is blaming the state for killing 63 people, what is the risk that there is an upspring? And although this is a lie, then all the authorities are allowed to stop this man from spreading lies. This is a question you have to answer. But in the world of today, the European Parliament wants to answer that question. Why? So you have to ask who has the power to decide on the cases of conflict between two confronting human rights in that point. Are the Europeans have to decide on those conflicts in Bangladesh? Have Human Rights Watch, based in Washington, D.C. or New York City, to decide on that conflict? Or the judges in Bangladesh? So you see that the concept of human rights has a lot of problems. It is now a political tool of the West. It is undefined who decides the cases of conflict. It is not reflecting the special situation in developing countries with existential needs for food, for water, for apartment, for economic development. And it is not implementing the situation that non-Western societies are societies of families rather than societies of individuals. So what the Global South has to do, and this is why I'm so proud that I'm so happy that we have academics here on the podium, is not just to ask how can diplomats deal with Western demands of human rights as Westerners do understand it. How diplomats have to deal, you can ask your ambassador. We deal today. This is a way of dealing with the human rights issue. But what non-Western academics have to do is they have to question the deficits of that concept. Because right now this concept is a Western concept based on Western traditions, with Western authorities and with the Western power to decide even in your domestic affairs. And what you have to do is now to go in and to say these are the problems and we want to have additions, we want to have changes, and we want to have adoptions, because if we want to have human rights as a truly global concept, then we have to develop it that it fits to truly global situations and is not any longer a concept of Western neo-colonialism. That said, if we are now want to bring Bangladesh in the GSP Plus scheme, which is important for your wealth, then we have to first see that you have to answer questions of the Western NGOs and of the European Union. I guess you can answer it when it comes to the executives, the law enforcement in Bangladesh going after extremism, going after people who want to disrupt public order. But in a wider sense, Bangladesh, along with India, along with African countries, needs to start a dialogue with European institutions and with other Western institutions and nations on how this concept of human rights can be developed in a way that it reflects the reality in the world and is no longer a mean of a neo-colonial approach to lecture the whole world, to run their countries after Western examples. This is what we talk about today. And but when I say I can do that with Bangladesh in a very easy way, because even after the standards we have here, the problems they would say you have, I don't say you have problems, but my colleagues, some would say there are problems with human rights in Bangladesh. They are, in my mind, not that fundamental that it would harm our future trade relations. But since we want to make these trade relations in future based on mutual interest and trust, and on transparency and honesty, it is time to start a debate not only about trade tariffs and on smiling in each other's face and hope that we can bypass those human rights dialogue, but that we indeed go fundamentally in and start to question some of the narratives the European Union and the Western NGOs share. So thanks for being here.